long lay the world in sin and error pining. That is where we have to begin today's sermon. But I promise you, we will not leave it there in the end. As many of you know, I've just returned from a 10-day trip to Palestine. I was part of a global delegation of Christians, mostly of 20 people, mostly from South Africa, also from the United States, Ecuador, and Canada. Our mission was twofold: to show solidarity with those who are suffering and to carry their voices and pain back home and share these with the world. I want, first of all, to thank you for your support, for your concern, and for your prayers, and for your financial support. Everywhere I went, I stressed that I was representing this congregation and Presbyterians throughout the United States. Together, our delegation represented millions of Christians from around the world, and this fact alone brought hope and encouragement to the Palestinians who feel deeply and terribly alone right now. Our Christian brothers and sisters in Palestine especially feel overlooked by Western Christians who often don't even acknowledge their existence, much less their pain. This is because of misguided theology that reveres the state of Israel and can justify and excuse almost any action, no matter how destructive or violent, to support this misguided view. You, all of you, went with me to demonstrate a different reality, to show by our presence there that there are Christians who care, to show that our brothers and sisters in Palestine are not overlooked, they are seen. This was our message of hope, and it was well received. It was received by a people who are longing for all the things that our passage promises: redemption, salvation, consolation. Jesus was presented in the temple according to the Mosaic law at 6 weeks old. Mary and Joseph brought him there to fulfill the laws, both the laws that a woman must fulfill after giving birth, and also the laws commanding that a firstborn son be dedicated to the Lord. They came to the temple to fulfill their duties under Jewish law, while they themselves and all the Jewish people lived under the boot of the Roman occupation. And it is the same today. Faithful and faith-filled people in Palestine living out their faith under Israeli occupation and longing, as those people did in the first century, for redemption and salvation and consolation. From representatives of the Latin Patriarchate in Jerusalem, we heard about a Christian cultural center in Gaza which took 15 years to build, demolished in an instant by Israeli bombs. We heard about people huddled in churches, running out of food, water, medicine, and every kind of supply. With hospitals turned to rubble, we heard about surgery performed without anesthesia. The solar panels and water tanks for a parish complex were targeted. Nothing and no one is spared as Gaza is systematically and relentlessly reduced to dust and rubble. We were told if you get sick or injured in Gaza, it is only a matter of time before you die. The people we met with also emphasized that we should not ignore what's happening in the West Bank of Palestine. While all eyes are on Gaza, the Israeli military and Israeli settlers are wreaking havoc across the West Bank. Israel has put all West Bank towns and villages under closure. Palestinians cannot leave their towns. This is why I couldn't go to see our friends at our partner church in Nablus. But I did send them greetings on WhatsApp And I know that many in our congregation and our congregation as a whole did that as well. And I received their greetings in return. And they sent a greeting to the church, which we will show you by video before the prayers of the people. Now more than ever, these ties are critical. These bonds of fellowship that cross boundaries and barbed wire of occupation are lifelines of hope. I got to see Doug Dix, our Presbyterian representative in Bethlehem. And at one of the church services I attended in Bethlehem, I was delighted to run into our guide Elias, known to those of you who went on our most recent trip and one of our previous trips. He was there in the congregation, and we exchanged a warm hug, and he sends his greetings to all of you as well. I got to see Daoud Nasser of the Tent of Nations and his wife Jihan in Bethlehem. Many of you here have been to the Tent of Nations, that Palestinian farm near Bethlehem that the Nasser family operates as a farm but also as a peace center, with the motto, "We refuse to be enemies." A treat for me was having lunch with Daoud and his family at his family home in Bethlehem and getting to meet his mother. Daoud has been staying in Bethlehem since October 7th, that he's been checking on the farm he and his family have as often as possible, and so far everything is intact. But the villagers in the Palestinian villages surrounding the farm have been attacked by Jewish settlers. We met with the cousin of one of the Israeli hostages held by Hamas, a young man who desperately pleads for the release of his cousin. We met with a Muslim sheikh who was recently detained by the Israeli authorities for one of his sermons, and he told us about this and he kind of laughed and said, yeah, he was detained, held for a while and released. He said, yes, I get detained about once every 6 months. It's a regular occurrence. There are regular violent incursions by the Israeli military into the West Bank towns, including Bethlehem and Nablus. Unemployment is sky high and the economic situation is dire. I have never seen Bethlehem this way, like a ghost town. I went into the Church of the Nativity, the church that commemorates Jesus' birth. There was a photographer there, but other than that, I was the only tourist in the church. It was a beautiful time for prayer, but a sad, sad time for Bethlehem. Since October 7th, around 280 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank, and many have been taken prisoner by Israel. And even as some Palestinian prisoners are released in prisoner exchanges, more are being kidnapped and incarcerated. I was able to visit Father Ibrahim and his family in Jordan. Father Ibrahim was the priest of our Nablus church 17 years ago when we first started the partnership. So I met with him and his wife and daughter Raneem and son Khalil and Raneem's little 1-year-old adorable toddler, George. They live in Jordan now. And I conveyed to their family your love and your prayers, and they asked me to send theirs to you. Seeing them was a joy, but they also told me that in recent days, Christian friends of theirs in Ramallah have been arrested by the Israeli military. One of the most difficult meetings we had, for me at least, was meeting with a young Palestinian man who had just recently been released from prison. At age 27, he had been in an Israeli prison for 10 years, since he was 17 years old. When he told us his age, I got a lump in my throat because he's the same age as our son, Calvin. He was arrested for throwing stones. Now, even if he had done this, keep in mind, this is throwing rocks at armored tanks. But he did not do that. He was at home, nowhere in the vicinity of where these rocks were being thrown. He told us about the conditions in jail, never good, but deteriorating since October 7th. The prisoners lacked medicine, food, blankets. They had previously been given a mattress to sleep on from precisely 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. when the mattress would be taken away. But since October 7th, sometimes not even a mattress, just the cold springs of the bed. And he said they would even pour water on the springs to make them more cold and more uncomfortable. His courage in speaking out was moving because he could at any time be rearrested and reincarcerated by the Israeli authorities. One of the interpreters explained to our group, our ambition is not to escape jail. Our ambition is freedom. In Jerusalem, we also met with a young woman, an activist and journalist who works for Amnesty International and documents what is happening in Gaza and the West Bank. She talked about how the situation is apartheid, and that is something that the Presbyterian Church has also affirmed. But she shared with us what she called the less visible elements of apartheid, the hierarchy of laws and regulations that fragment the lives of Palestinians. She said that life all the way from the womb through death and beyond death is under the control of Israel. And what she meant by that was if you're a prisoner and you die in prison as a Palestinian, the Israeli authorities may hold on to your body, denying your family even a proper burial. She talked about how in Gaza, families are completely decimated. They and all their possessions, including their phones and their photos, are destroyed by bombing. No tangible evidence is left that a family ever existed. And I share this now because it is our duty to know and remember these families existed. She said that since October 7th, Israel has been trying to put Palestinians on mute. People are charged as criminals for what they post online or even for liking a post online. She added, "My only consoling idea is that we need to bear witness. This is also a war on memory. You can fight this by remembering." Remembering and telling are acts of resistance, acts of redemption and salvation and consolation. We also went to the Dheisheh refugee camp in Bethlehem, and again, some of you have been to the Dheisheh camp. There we met with the former minister of prisoners for Palestinians, and the fact that in the Palestinian government there is a position called Minister for Prisoners tells you something. Thousands of Palestinians have been arrested. Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, as I said earlier, are subject to terrible ill treatment. Lack of food, we heard their conditions called barbaric. And this host, like our other hosts, emphasized to us that it was important to see us there, to be present as witnesses to the suffering. And he added that, having heard, he hoped that we would now be their voice. Also in Bethlehem, we heard another young woman who has family in Gaza. They're hiding out in churches, and they've dispersed themselves into different buildings. So if a building is hit, not all of the family members will be killed. As the atrocities continue, she said it seems to her that humanity is in a coma. As humanity was in a coma in first century Palestine, the devout Simeon and Anna, both elderly, waited for the consolation of Israel. Their faith inspires ours. the faith that calls us to weep with those who weep, to come alongside our suffering neighbor and take their hand and look into their eyes with the consoling love of God. God became incarnate in the little town of Bethlehem 2,000 years ago, and God invites us today to the holy task of incarnating the Spirit of God in Bethlehem and all over the world. Our delegation wanted the people we met with to know that they are seen and heard. They feel abandoned by the world, but we were able to say, God has not abandoned you. We are here and carrying in our hearts the love of millions, your love. You are seen, you are heard, you are loved, you are not alone, was our message. On December 23rd, our delegation attended the worship service at the Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem, where Palestinian priest Munther Isaac gave the sermon. This is the service that was live streamed around the world, and some of you, I know, were able to watch it. Thousands tuned in. It took place in the sanctuary where the now iconic manger scene is on display, with the baby Jesus wrapped in a keffiyeh, the black and white scarf, resting on a bed of crumbling concrete. In answer to the lament, "Where is God in all of this?" Reverend Munther answered, "God is under the rubble." He warned his listeners that silence is complicity, and he called for an immediate ceasefire. He said, "We are angry, we are broken, we are fearful. The world is watching. Churches are watching, and we are tormented by the silence of the world." But he went on, "This Christ child under the rubble is," he said, "our hope and inspiration. In his weakness, his meekness, and his vulnerability, Jesus is the long-awaited consolation." Munther Isaac did not mince words. As he said, in the U.S., they send us bombs while celebrating Christmas in their land. One member of our delegation found 2 tear gas canisters near the wall. He took a photo of them. They are clearly marked with their place of origin: Pennsylvania, the United States of America. As an American, it is a hard truth to swallow that our tax dollars fund the atrocities taking place now. Our diplomatic cover stops ceasefire resolutions in the United Nations Security Council and gives a green light to the continued violence. But in these cold, hard truths, we also find our calling as Christians. We are called to be the voice and the hands and the feet of Christ, speaking and acting against the suffering that we witness. We are not helpless. This is made clear in our passage where the elderly, Simeon and Anna, the mother, Mary, a woman in a patriarchal society, and the tiny newborn baby Messiah are the ones who herald a new day of consolation. The message we have will not be welcomed by all. Simon prophesies to Mary that her own soul will be pierced, that this child will be the cause of rising for many, yes, but also falling for others. This is God, breaking into the world where sin and error pine, disrupting the status quo, disturbing the veneer of calm, and doing this to bring peace, real peace. How can we be God's voice and hands at this time? We will each find our own way, guided by God's Spirit. We can and should contact our elected officials. And we can use our social media voices to call others to do the same and to raise awareness. On January 13th, there'll be a rally here in D.C. Some of us will attend that. The plea our delegation heard from those with whom we met was this: push your congregation and your nations to end this war. It was a tremendous privilege to be a part of this delegation. And it also gave me a tremendous responsibility. And because it was not just my trip, but belongs to all of us, we all have this responsibility. We have heard the cries of the suffering. And with Simeon and Anna, we have witnessed the inbreaking of God into the world, bringing redemption and salvation and consolation. May we go into this new year giving voice and action to this living hope. Amen.